this Saturday's fight coming up with Canelo Alvarez, you know, and that's really what the bottom line is, because Saul Canelo Alvarez, there's a trilogy that's going to take place, him against Triple G scheduled for May. Obviously, Alvarez has some work to do this coming weekend. He's getting ready to fight a Rocky Fielding, 27-1 fighter, by the way. He's getting ready to fight this guy. Canelo Alvarez is 50-1 with 34 KOs. He is something special. Make no mistake about it. And I can't wait to talk to Dan Rayfield about him, talk to him about Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, and the fight that happened a couple of weeks ago at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. I was there. I was in attendance for that fight. And obviously there's something that's going to take place where Anthony Joshua is waiting for them to fight one another. He's got April 13th open at Wembley Stadium. He wants to fight one of those guys, but obviously they're preoccupied with a rematch against each other, so we'll see what that happens. Oh, anyway, I'll get back to my calls a little bit later on. Thanks for the call, Corey. I appreciate it. Dan Rayfield, boxing writer extraordinaire for ESPN, is on the line with yours truly right now. What's going on, Dan? How are you, buddy? Dan, are you there?
Hey, Stephen. Hey, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right, buddy. How's everything?
Everything is great.
How much should we be looking forward to this fight with Canelo Alvarez versus Fielding tomorrow night at Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, listen, I just came from the weigh-in. I mean, there was a lot of people there that were cheering on for Canelo. You know, if you're a Canelo fan, you obviously got to watch the fight. If you're interested to see one of the very best fighters in boxing take a step up to another weight class that he's never fought in before in the 168-pound division, obviously it's worth watching. There's some good fighters on the undercard. I'm a big fan of Kevin Farmer from your old neck of the woods in Philadelphia, who holds one of the titles at 130 pounds, a real outstanding, slick boxer, in with a pretty good opponent. So, and the thing that the folks who are selling the fight, unlike the typical Canelo Alvarez fight for the past number of years, it's not an $80 pay-per-view. They put it on the streaming service. You can buy it for $10 a month, and for this particular one, you can order it. And if you don't like it, you can cancel and not have to pay anything. So you actually can get a Canelo Alvarez fight for free. So that's a big selling point. And, you know, you can decide to keep it because I got plenty of boxing on there and other combat sports. But, you know, most people think Canelo should win the fight very handily against Rocky Fielding.
Let me ask you this. Why is he taking this fight? Is this simply for this, you know, WBA belt? Is that what this is? Why is he moving up to 168?
I think, you know, he has in mind historical accomplishments. He's done so many things in his career. A couple things at play here. Number one, he wanted to fight a second time this year. Remember, he had the first fight in May with Golovkin that was canceled because of the positive drug test that he claims was simply because he ingested tainted meat. So he fought the fight in September. He wanted to fight a second time. He wanted to fight in New York City. The Madison Square Garden was available. It's one of the things on his bucket list, so he's going to get to accomplish that. So many of the greats have fought here. His idol is Muhammad Ali. He wanted to fight in a place where Ali had famous fights. And because Rocky Fielding was available and there wasn't necessarily a huge middleweight fight available for him in the month of December, they sort of looked around and saw who has a title. For him, being a Mexican, he wants to be one of the very few Mexicans to win a world title in the third weight class. So you take all those factors into account. That's the reason why he's fighting Rocky Fielding, why he's fighting in December, and why he's fighting in New York City.
Tell us a little bit about Fielding. All I know about him is that he's 27-1. He got knocked out once in his career. He's 27-1 with 15 KOs. That's what I know about him, and he got knocked out by some guy named Caleb Smith. That's all I know about him. Talk to me about Fielding.
Tell you a little bit about him. Number one, they're fighting for a belt, but it's the second-tier title because, as I have railed against numerous times over my career, the WBA, one of the most disgusting boxing sanctioning organizations that has ever been created, they will sanction multiple world titles in the same division. So Rocky Fielding holds the second-tier title. The guy that holds the first-tier title in that organization happens to be Callum Smith, who before he won that title, when they were fighting for the British title, knocked out Rocky Fielding in the first round, dropped him 3 times. So, you know, there's obviously the veracity of the belt, from my perspective, is not that big of a deal. Now, Canelo Alvarez thinks it's an important thing, and so he's going for it. But Rocky Fielding has rebounded very nicely from that loss. He's won about 4 or 5 fights in a row, and most significantly, this past July, he traveled to Germany and was a very big underdog when he fought a fighter named Tyrone Zegg in his hometown, and he won the fight by impressive knockout to get this belt. So he's coming off a fight in which he was a huge underdog, perhaps not as big of an underdog as he is against Canelo, but he's got a big heart. He's a lot bigger than Canelo Alvarez. He towers over him by several inches. He's just a much bigger man, and he's not a bad fighter. He's just not at the elite level like a Canelo Alvarez.
Dan Rayfield, boxing writer extraordinaire for ESPN, ESPN.com, right here with Stephen A. and ESPN Radio, ESPN News. So with that being said, assuming that Canelo Alvarez wins this fight, which we all assume will happen, what do you see next for him? Is it the trilogy against Triple G that's supposedly scheduled for May? Is it him fighting one of the, Jamel Charlo? I mean, what's next for him?
Well, he has a date that they have put on reserve for May 4th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. The commission, which posted the date request on their calendar, for whatever reason, they just made fools of themselves, and they posted that it was for a Golovkin third fight. That was a mistake on their part, and they've actually taken that down after a lot of people saw that and questioned them about it. Okay. There was never a deal. There's never been a conversation thus far. Golovkin is in his own situation where he's trying to figure out what to do with his career. Obviously, with HBO leaving their boxing business, his contract, as well as Canelo's contract, expiring with HBO, he's now a broadcast free agent. And so he's been out there. He's been hearing offers from DAZN. He's been hearing offers from ESPN and Top Rank. He's been hearing offers from the premier boxing champion. So he's in a very good position. But if he wants to get a third fight with Canelo in the not-too-distant future, he's going to really have no choice but to sign with DAZN, because they're the folks that gave Canelo a record-breaking contract for 5 years, 11 fights, and $365 million. So he can have a third fight with Canelo probably, I would probably estimate next September, not May, which wouldn't be when Canelo will fight. So the question is, if he's not fighting Golovkin in the third fight in May, who's he going to fight? There was a chance that he might have fought David Lemieux, a former world title holder who had a loss by
knockout artist. Yes.
Right. Here's the problem. He was supposed to fight in the co-feature against Turiano Johnson in a very solid fight on the undercard Saturday night. But he had a lot of problems with his weight. He was dehydrated. They took him to the hospital this morning, and he's off the card. And I guarantee you that, number one, they're never going to put him in another fight as a middleweight. And number two, even if they would, Golden Boy, his promoter, is not going to risk a big promotion with he can't make the weight and hasn't really earned that shot with what happened today. So that clears the path, in my view, that there won't be a Lemieux fight. I think there's a pretty good chance that it could be the IBF middleweight title holder, and that's Daniel Jacobs, who won that belt in October at the Madison Square Garden Theater in a very good, solid fight against Sergey Deverenchenko, and he's been campaigning to get that fight. He's also a free agent from TV and promotional. The DAZN is interested in signing him, Eddie Hearn, and so he may fight Daniel Jacobs.
Dan Rayfield, real quick, I'm just asking you this because of your obvious expertise in the sport of boxing. Surprised at all, real quickly, if you could, surprised at all that HBO has gotten out of the boxing business?
I guess I'm not surprised that they exited the business. I think what has surprised most people was the speed in which they did that. I mean, in September, they had the big mega fight with Canelo and Golovkin, and then a couple of weeks later, they announced they were done. The problem they encountered was they have so much competition from Showtime, from PBC, from ESPN now with Top Rank, from DAZN, and they didn't have access to the best fighters because the Top Rank fighters are on ESPN and the PBC fighters are on Showtime, plus their new deal that starts next week with Fox, and DAZN signing some of the fighters they have with Eddie Hearn and also now with Golden. And so they just said, you know what, we don't want to be second place, third place, now even maybe fourth place. Our competition is really Netflix and original entertainment. And so they made a decision to leave the boxing business after 45 years, a glorious history of so many of the biggest fights we've ever seen. And, I'm very sad about it, but life goes on.
Gotcha. Dan Rayfield, before I let you get on out of here, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, what were your thoughts about that fight real quick? And when do you think one of them, preferably Deontay Wilder in my estimation, will get in the ring against Anthony Joshua?
Well, first of all, their fight, that was a couple weeks ago that I had the opportunity to be at in Los Angeles. One hell of a fight, one of the better heavyweight fights I've been at in a long, long time. I was in the minority. I thought that Deontay Wilder won that fight very closely, had the two knockdowns. I'm here at lunch with my good buddy Lance Pugmire from the LA Times. He also had Deontay Wilder winning the fight, so maybe we're a little bit off base from what most people thought.
I had Fury winning by decision because I only had Wilder winning one round, with the exception of the 2 rounds that he had a knockdown in 110-8. But go ahead.
I've gone back and watched it. There was a close fight. There was a lot of close rounds, and so if you give Wilder just a couple of them, you can come out with him winning. But the bottom line is it turned out to be a draw, and there's disagreement among the judges, the disagreement between some of the fans and writers. A lot of people had Fury winning for sure, but there were some that had Wilder winning, and some people had it a draw. But as far as when they're going to fight Anthony Joshua, I think Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder have some unfinished business. They both spoke very passionately about wanting to have a rematch in their next fight. Joshua is here in New York. His promoter, Eddie Hearn, is also the promoter for Rocky Fielding, so he's going to meet with some of us media guys tomorrow to talk a little about it. I know he did your show with Max this week. He's now saying he wants to fight Wilder. At the end of the day, they have to make an equitable deal. The deal that they offered Deontay in the first place was a joke of a deal for that level of fight, and they know it. So even if they decide to give him a better offer, it's going to come down to the problem of what platform is it going to be on. You know, it's one thing in the old days when HBO and Showtime teamed up to do joint pay-per-views for Mayweather, Pacquiao, for Lewis and Tyson. DAZN now has a contract, with Eddie Hearn, which is the promoter for Joshua. Now, he doesn't have to be on that platform, but I think they might make it worth his while. The point is, though, DAZN doesn't want to do pay-per-view, so there's no even conversation about a joint event. One wants pay-per-view, one wants streaming, so they got to figure that out before anything can be real.
Dan Rayfield, always appreciate your expertise, buddy. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.
You bet, Stephen A. Thanks a lot, man.
One and only Dan Rayfield, boxing writer extraordinaire for ESPN, ESPN.com, right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News.
The Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Welcome back. Tower number 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you right here on ESPN Radio and ESPN News, live from South Street Seaport, Pier 17, Winterland, rooftop of Pier 17 right here in New York City. Number to call up, as always in the Stephen A. Smith Show, is 888-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Commercial insurance through Progressive protects your business and your dream. Choose from over 30 coverage options at progressivecommercial.com. On the line with me right now is a colleague and a buddy, one of the great reporters in this business, my colleague at ESPN, who's the director of the 30 for 30 documentary on Buster Douglas and his upset over Mike Tyson after being 42-1 odds against him. I'm talking about the great Jeremy Schaap is on the line with me as we speak. Jeremy, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Mr. Smith, it is a pleasure to be speaking to you as always.
Thanks a lot, buddy. Let's get right to it. Buster Douglas, you know, what inspired you to do it? Was it just that it was the 42-1 odds, the upset of Mike Tyson, or was there something else that made this so intriguing for you to direct?
I mean, Steven, there's so many things about this story. For me, I was 20 years old when it happened, and I still think it's the most stunning, the most thrilling thing I've ever seen in sports. You know, Mike Tyson was considered invincible, and this guy, no one thought he had a chance. Very few people even knew who he was outside of the world of boxing, really. Even mainstream sports fans were only dimly aware of his existence. And he didn't just go there to Tokyo on February 11, 1990. He didn't get lucky. It wasn't a fluke. Buster Douglas kicked Mike Tyson's butt for 10 rounds. He pulled off arguably the biggest upset ever in sports. And his incredible backstory, that's what really intrigued me. And it's a story that I've told to some extent before with Mike Tyson, with Buster Douglas. I did stories on the 20th anniversary of the win, the 25th anniversary of the win. And yet most people, even sports fans, real sports fans and real boxing aficionados, don't know how rich and deep his story is. The complicated relationship with his father, who was a prize fighter. His reputation in the game was the opposite of Buster's. People might remember that Buster's mother, Lula Pearl Douglas, died 23 days before the fight, but to really explore the impact of that. And one of the things that's always fascinated me in sports, I know it has you as well, are athletes who find this one moment of transcendence, of perfection, where they are their absolute best versions of themselves, where they tap into all of their potential. They realize all of their talent. To me, it's like Bob Beamon jumping 29 feet, 2.5 inches in Mexico City in 1968. And to see, to see this film come to fruition, to see Buster's story told in this way, it was really a dream come true for me.
You know, it's interesting because watching that, and I watched it the other night, and I loved it, by the way. Great job on your part. But I got to tell you, and Ben Hauser, for example, I mean, as well.
My co-director.
You co-directed with him. Both of you, but both of you were fantastic in it. I tell you, I walked away still, Jeremy, feeling as if Buster Douglas's mother had not passed away 3 weeks before the fight, I don't think he would have won that fight.
You know what?
What do you think?
I think, Stephen A., I think Buster probably agrees with you. because that was, I mean, look, he was approaching this fight from the second it was made, which was a couple of months before his mother's death, the kind of intensity and commitment and sense of purpose that was not typical for him, that exceeded or surpassed basically the way he'd approached so many other fights in his career. So I think we were going to see a different Buster Douglas at the Tokyo Dome than we saw against Tony Tucker, than we saw against Jesse Ferguson. But he was on this 6-fight winning spree. I think he was committed, as I said, but I think his mother's death, in a sense, elevated him to a new level of focus and commitment, and the sense that, hey, everything is collapsing around me, and I am going to take advantage of this opportunity because I might never get another one like this, and I am going to honor her. I am going to honor my father. I am going to show the world that the Buster Douglas they've called a quitter, the Buster Douglas they've called an underachiever, the Buster Douglas they've accused of not realizing his full potential and utilizing all his talents, that's not going to be the Buster Douglas they see against Mike Tyson.
Well, he gave people fodder to think that way,
No doubt.
particularly when he had lost to Tony Tucker
No doubt.
prior, a couple of fights prior to the Tyson fight, if I remember correctly, watching the documentary. But I'll ask you this question. One of the most poignant moments in that documentary was when he called his mother because he wanted her there. He wanted her to join him because he was letting his father go as his trainer. When you talk about Buster Douglas and, going into the Tyson fight, and prior to that, the reputation that he had for not giving it his all, per se, being a bit flabby, not conditioning himself, being the absolute antithesis of what his father was when his father was a fighter. What role did his father play in him being the person that he wasn't until the Mike Tyson fight?
I think that's an excellent question. I think everybody who knows Buster and who also knew Bill Douglas, his father, who died almost 20 years ago, considered them just extremely different personalities. And I'm sure growing up in a household with 3 other brothers, all of them were fighters, a father who was considered the epitome of the tough guy in a tough business. I mean, it's one thing to be just a tough guy, doing your day job or whatever, but to be considered one of the toughest guys in the boxing game, and that's what Bill Douglas was considered, that's intimidating. And that's not Buster Douglas's innate personality. That's not his nature. He's a very gentle guy. He really was, according to people who knew them, much more like his mother than his father. And so to have that pressure of trying to live up to the toughness that his father epitomized, that was hard on him. Look, he had all this talent. He's a much bigger guy than his father. His father was natural middleweight, fought a little bit as light heavy. Buster's a big guy, 6'4", 250 probably, walking around weight most of the time. And he has all these gifts. But the question was, as you say, always the intensity. I think with him, there's always that question, as Al Bernstein said, hanging in the air about his relationship with his father. Would it hold him back? It got him to a certain point. His father was his first trainer. He climbed up rapidly through the ranks of the heavyweight division as a contender. But was it also at the finish line a kind of stumbling block mentally? Because, there were these expectations that were going to be so difficult to meet. And firing his father after the Tony Tucker fight, when there was so much chaos in his own camp, in his corner, all that, after he could have taken a share of the heavyweight title in 1987, that's one of the inflection points in our story. He had to fire his father to get to the ultimate destination, which was the heavyweight championship.
And you also talked about in the documentary, Jeremy Schaap, how the brother talked about how their mom would not let the family fragment. It wouldn't let the family come apart because Buster Douglas decided to get rid of his dad as a trainer. But moving forward from that, and I didn't see this part in the documentary because you may not have touched on it, but he lost to Evander Holyfield via third-round TKO in defending the crown that he took from Mike Tyson. As you talk to Buster Douglas and he reflects on what transpired in his life? I'm quite sure you've asked that question, just looking forward from that moment forward. What did you peel from Buster Douglas in terms of the kind of man he is, how much of a peace he is with himself, et cetera, et cetera? What did you take from all
You know,
that?
we've explored that in the past with Buster, and in this film, we really culminate with the victory. We're focusing on this transcendent moment, but we deal with it in the epilogue very briefly, that he loses the title 8 months later to Evander.
Right.
He got the biggest paycheck in the history of sports up to that point, $24 million, which is $48 million in today's currency. But Buster certainly had regrets, and I'm sure there are things he would like to do differently. His life was in such turmoil in the immediate aftermath of that win. He was fighting Don King in court. He was fighting to hold on to the title after the long count. He couldn't enjoy or really bask in the glow of that incredible win. And he goes into that fight out of shape, unmotivated, and I think very much in a place that we wouldn't call serene. I think now Buster Douglas, he's 58 years old. He works in a rec center in Columbus, his hometown, Ohio. He trains young boxers. All the money's gone. But I think he's happy. I think he's at peace with himself. I think he likes what he's doing. Certainly he'd like to have some of the money still, I'm sure. But, you know, all the complications it brought, all of the, you know, people pulling at him left and right. I think he's at a place now where he's pretty good. And I know he's enjoying kind of this moment where people are talking about him again.
Jeremy Schaap, appreciate the great work as always, man. Thank you so much. 30 for 30 documentary on Buster Douglas. 42-1 odds against him to beat Mike Tyson. He defied him, knocked out Mike Tyson to win a heavyweight championship of the world. Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Appreciate it, buddy.
Always a pleasure, sir.